So yeah, thanks everyone for coming this evening, and thanks for listening to my presentation. I'll keep this fairly high level because there is some detail to it, but I will cover all the key points. So this is a presentation on the new or fairly new tools that Epic Games have produced themselves for Unreal Engine. So the agenda is, I'll just give a brief overview of how to set them up, because it is a little bit fiddly, not too complicated, but a little bit fiddly. I'll then give a short overview of an Unreal Engine level, and then just I'll demonstrate importing some models and also some animations. It can still be a little bit buggy, this software, but hopefully it'll all work as planned. Okay, so I'll just go into the setup. So you need to have an Epic Games account, and you also need to have a GitHub account as well. I don't know if any of you or many of you are using GitHub, but it is a really useful resource, and I do recommend it. And there's actually quite a lot of free downloads for add-ons into Blender and Unreal Engine, so it's definitely worth investigating. And I've actually started to use GitHub to back up some of my projects as well. So it's worth having a look at, but sorry, that was me digressing a bit. So once you've got those two accounts, you just go into your Unreal account online, go into your profile and connections, and then you just have to connect your GitHub account to Unreal Engine, as shown in this screen. After that, then you can go into GitHub, and you can go to the Blender tools in GitHub, and you can download them just as zip files. Once you've downloaded them, then it's just a standard installation process that you'll do with any Blender add-on. There are two downloads. There's Center Unreal, and then there's Rigify. This presentation will be more concentrated on the first one, as the second one I haven't used much, but the bulk of the work that I do, I use the first one, but I will explain what the second one does. So when you've got the installation, when you've got the plugin installed, it will create 4 default folders. It's got mesh, rig, collision, and extras. These automatically generate every time you load Blender. So you may want to consider turning off the plugin when you're not using it, because it can get in the way a little bit. But obviously that would be your own decision. So that's from Blender. That's setting it up in Blender. There's a couple of things you need to do in Unreal Engine. So in Unreal Engine, you need to enable a Python plugin, and you also need to enable remote execution. And finally, you can enable use less CPU when in background. This will update Unreal Engine even when it's not in use. You don't have to do that final bit, but it's probably a good idea to. And that should be it. Once you've gone through those settings, that should be everything. So as mentioned, it's a little bit fiddly, but it's nothing that's too complicated. Okay. So now I'll just go into Unreal Engine and then just show a simple level that I have set up. Can you see that okay? Yes. Okay. So for those that aren't familiar with Unreal Engine, this is obviously the layout. On the right-hand side, it's got all the assets that are in the level. I've just saved some of these into folders. So I've got the landscape. I've got some mannequins which come with default with Unreal Engine. This landscape tile is fairly big. I think it comes in at about 1 kilometer in real life scale. Obviously, you can create landscape tiles in different sizes, and then you can also join them together and do various things depending on the size of your level. It's fairly straightforward to set up. So this is a landscape tile that I created. I added a single material, which is just a ground grass material. There are more complex and advanced materials for landscapes where you can actually paint different layers. So I could paint on a path, or I could paint on stone and things like that. And then obviously I could also add foliage or trees, or do a lot more work on the detailing. But this is a fairly simple setup just to demonstrate these tools. I'll just show one other thing fairly quickly. So when you're in a landscape, you can go to modes, click on landscape, and you can go into sculpt. And this is where you can sculpt the landscape, you know, adding details and so forth. So here I've got the sculpt tool selected, and I can select pattern for the brush, which gives a more detailed brush. And then I've added a noise texture to the brush, and then strength is about 0.1, which is fairly weak, but it means I can slowly build up a layer or a landscape. And then I can just kind of paint on the landscape, you know, add in details and so forth, which is actually can be quite therapeutic at times. So it is, once you get used to it, it's actually a very enjoyable tool to use. So I'm just going to go back into select mode. And yeah, so that's a very quick introduction to Unreal Landscape. So I'm going to open up Blender, and I prepared two Blender files that I will import into Blender. So the first one is just of a barn, fairly straightforward, nothing too complex about it. It's got a single material, which is just been called barn, and it's got 3 different textures. One is just a color texture, which is just the planks. Then it's got a roughness, and it's also got a normal texture as well. So fairly straightforward setup. Nothing too complex there. One thing that's worth pointing out when it comes to games engines, specifically if you're making maybe a game as opposed to a cinematic in Unreal Engine, it is a good idea to only have one material slot, because obviously you can add lots of materials to one model, but when you import that into a games engine, what it does is it creates what's called a draw call. So if I had 10 materials associated with this model, it would create 10 draw calls, and things like that can really affect performance in video games and games engines. If it's a cinematic, then you wouldn't need to worry so much, but for an actual game or VR environment, something like that, that could have some big effects on the performance. So yeah, so that's the model, fairly straightforward. As mentioned, it's got these folders here that it sets up. One of the things that you have to do for this to work is make sure that your model is moved into the appropriate folder. So in this case, if I had barn outside and not in the mesh folder, it wouldn't work. So it has to be in one of these folders. So I've got the barn in the mesh folder, and now all I need to do is go up to pipeline, which will be added when you install the plugin, and then just go to export and send to Unreal. Before I do that, I'm just going to reduce the size of the screen so you can see it happen. One final thing. In the plugin, when you go to preferences and Unreal, send to Unreal, you can rename the folder, the name of the folder that's created in Unreal Engine. When I import this in, the folder will just be called Untitled, but you can give that a name. So if you're working with a team or something like that, or you're going to send the project on to somebody else, then you've got properly named folders. So hopefully this will work. So I'm going to go to pipeline and export and send to Unreal. And there it is. So there's my model. Those are the textures. And this is the material that's been created in Unreal Engine. One of the things with this add-on, doesn't, I don't know why it is, but with roughness, I don't know if it's a bug, it always plugs it into metallic. So I've just got to do some tweaks to the material. I'm just going to pull the roughness into the roughness slot, just so that's in the right position. I also just need to open up the roughness texture file, and I need to change its compression settings to mask. Let's go back there. So it's on mask. And then I'm just going to save it. And then just in the material editor, I'm going to do the sampler type to mask as well, just so it matches. Because obviously a roughness, it tells the material where it should be rough and where it should be smooth. So it's not like a color file, it's a mask file. So I'm just going to save that. And so that's just updated that material. And now I'm just going to drag the barn into the level. And there it is. Pretty straightforward. It certainly speeds up the process. Now with this model, if I wanted to make some tweaks in Blender, I can go back into Blender. I can go into edit mode and I'll just select some sections of the roof. And I'll just select those. And I'm just going to delete those. So I've got rid of some parts of the roof. And now all I need to do is go back to pipeline, export, and then send to Unreal. And you can see that it's updated the model in Unreal Engine. So it's a lot quicker than having to, re-import the model, going to, where is it, going to add import and then importing a model that way. You can just do it as you're working in Blender. One of the things that I believe that Epic is working on in regards to this, and one thing that does need improvement, is the material. The material isn't updating. So if I made some edits to this material and then re-imported it, it wouldn't actually change. For example, I can try making the base color red, something like that. I'll delete that, and then I can try exporting it again, but it's not actually working. As you can see, it hasn't actually changed the material. So if you did make any changes to the material, you'd have to just go through the bit of a manual process again and just export the text, import the textures, and then put them in manually. So that's updating a static mesh. I'll just demonstrate now importing a model that's got an animation. Now I mean, I've been using Unreal Engine for about kind of 18 months now. So I've got pretty familiar with it, although I'm not I wouldn't say I'm an advanced user or anything like that. But it's interesting reading on some of the forums and so forth, some of the issues that there's been between taking models with animations or models with armatures into Unreal Engine, and it's been quite painful. Like axes, orientations get corrupted or skewed or twisted. So it's been quite difficult in the past, but this add-on has really helped to improve things. So just a very quick overview here of this model I created. So very simple model. I took the basic cube, duplicated it, moved it around, and then just did an enlarged cube for this character's head. I then joined them together so they're all one mesh. I then just added a meta rig. Let me see if I can bring that into view. There it is. So yeah, it's a basic human meta rig using Rigify. It was just a basic human one. Of course, you could use an advanced one with a face if you wanted to, but this is just a simple demonstration. So I set that up. I then just did the convert to rig. So I've got a default a default Rigify rig, which is working, as you can see. So I'll just reset that. And then I created a couple of very basic animations. Now, one other thing, these tools use NLA or non-linear animation editing strips, which I didn't actually even, I wasn't even aware that Blender had until very recently, literally a few days. But they are incredibly useful for adding animations all into one line, and then you can kind of speed them up and move them about and scale them and slow them down and so forth. So that's been that has actually been something that I've learned about Blender very recently. So I created a basic animation. I saved it in Action Editor. And then you can use push down, and then it adds it to the NLA timeline. And I did the same thing just with another animation. So the first animation here, the character is just moving up and down. And the second animation is oh, he should be moving his arm, but I may have edited that by accident. So he's not actually doing much now. But anyway, I've got the first animation working. So now all you do is take the mesh of your character. In this case, it's kind of like a blocky robot man. Move that into the mesh folder, and then take the rig and move that into the rig folder, and that's like the Rigify rig with the meta rig all in one into the rig folder. And then it's just you follow the same process as what I did before. So I'm just gonna reduce the size of this Blender screen. Oh, there is one final thing which is really important and a bit annoying. You need to, if you do anything with animations, it's not so important with static meshes, but if you're working with animations and armatures, you need to go to weld or the scene settings, and you need to change the unit scale to 0.01. I mean, usually this would just be 1.0, but you have to divide it by 100. It's just a requirement going into Unreal Engine. If you don't, these meshes with armatures, they come in, they're absolutely huge. Even on a giant landscape, they would, even a little part of them would fill up the entire map. So you just have to remember to do the unit scale. So I'm just going to resize the Blender window. I'll just move that a little bit. Okay. And I'm just going to do the same thing I did before. I'm just going to go into pipeline, export and send to Unreal. Hopefully it'll work. Yes. Okay. So there's our character. He's tiny at the moment because of the scaling, but you have to go through the scale and just go from 1 up to 100. And that brings him up to the scale that I was expecting. I'll just move him here. And it's created a folder now called animations. And both those animations are here. Although the Rigify test one wasn't doing much, the up and down one was working. So, you know, I mean, in Unreal Engine, there's different ways you can apply animations. If I was creating a cinematic, so what I would do is just in animations, so I could create a folder called animations or cinematic. I would then go to animation and I would create a level sequence. I can call this demo 2. Just load that up. And then these animation sequences are basically timelines where you can move in assets and cameras and so forth, and then create animations and animate objects within Unreal Engine. So I'm just going to create a new camera and add what's called a camera cut. It's automatically moved the viewport into the camera. So now I'm viewing through the camera. I can just click this eject button here, and that takes me out of the camera. I've got one camera there from when I was testing, but this is the camera that I just created that's there. I can, you know, I can move this around, and when it's selected, it's got a little video screen that comes up. It's easier to right click on the camera and just go into pilot, and then I'm piloting the camera and the viewport becomes a camera view. So I'll just take maybe a view like this just for this test, and then I will grab the robot mesh. I'll pull it down and drop it into the sequencer. So now this robot mesh has become part of the video animation. And if I click on animation here, it's already got the 2 animations that I imported with Blender. It should find them automatically. If not, you may have a bug in the animation. But they're both there now. So I'm just going to click on up and down. And if I press play, he should start moving up and down. And there. So that has really simplified the workflow, especially with animations, moving them to Unreal Engine from Blender. If I wanted to create another animation, just one final thing, I can simply go back into Blender, turn those, mute those animations there. Maybe I can quickly grab this robot's neck, see if I can, let's see. It's doing a kind of a shoulder roll. So I'll just reset that. I'm just gonna insert location and rotation. Just move that there. Put another keyframe there. Maybe one more keyframe there. And then the final one, I'll just reset it. So I'm just inserting keyframes for location and rotation. Just play that back. So very, very basic animation there. And all I do now is click push down. I didn't actually rename it then in the action editor, but it's called rig action. So when I slide that along, you can see he's doing the same animation that I just created. And then all I need to do is the same thing I did before, which is go back to pipeline, export, and then send to Unreal. And let's see if that worked. So rig action, and I'll play that. So I've just added that rig action animation, and you can see it working there. He was having a bit of a workout, and that's it. Hopefully you got the key points there. I did cover that in quite high level, but this is certainly a really big improvement to what was there previously when everything was done manually. The one other tool that I mentioned, sorry, just there was one final thing. The one other tool that I mentioned, which was UE to Rigify. What you can do with that is, if I took, for example, a character from Unreal Engine, such as this mannequin, I could import him into Unreal, and then using this eyedropper, I could select his meta rig, or his skeleton that he comes with, and it would convert it into a Rigify rig, which I could then animate, or the animator could animate and then export back into Unreal Engine. And yeah, that's it. Thanks everyone for listening.